Good afternoon, everybody. It's Sunday afternoon. This is Art Shed with the show. Hey, let's be reasonable. This show is all about U.S. politics with particular interest toward the 2024 presidential election cycle. I've said this on a number of occasions during some of our broadcasts. This is going to be one of the doozies of a doozies when it comes to the election cycle and congressional elections. It's just shaping up that way based on everything that is transpiring. We know that there are a number of different issues out there that we should be concerned about. And of course, this show is here in order to present those items. So it's the weekend. So this is where we do our top five. And you have to forgive me because I'm pulling double duty. I'm trying to watch the Colts game, which is on the big screen in front of me, and also do a broadcast. So we'll see how it all turns out. So, hey, first of all, I want to tell you, Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year to you. 'Tis the season. I hope you are enjoying your families and your friends. I hope this season turns out to be a blessing to everybody. So that being said, just enjoy yourself. Other than that, folks, I'm going to tell you this show, a little bit about it. We started about 3 months ago. In October, we did our first show. And of course, again, it is dedicated to U.S. politics. And we just thought that it would be a good idea to do a show about U.S. politics and in particular about the election cycle. So that being said, I mean, we do a couple shows during the week. Those are shorts. And then we do a live broadcast or not a live, but a longer broadcast on the weekends, the top five. So where we run down the top five news stories of the week. So it's the weekend. So we're going to talk about the top five news stories of the week ending 23 of 2023. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to first start by actually just talking to you. Try to look at some of these features here too. So I can get accustomed to how all of these little features work. I can end the broadcast. I can, let's see, send feed. I can pop out the dashboard. Okay, so there's a number of different features here. Hopefully I can get some of these in. But anyway, let's go ahead and do the show. Got five stories. We'll talk about it. It shouldn't take no more than like 30 minutes in order to get all the way through. But let's go ahead and start by first talking about the number five story. In the number five story, we have to talk about, well, first and foremost, the issue with Tim Burchett and Congress. Senator Marsha Blackburn had petitioned the Judicial Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, to look into the Jeffrey Epstein flight logs. And according to her, that was denied. I don't know if that was the case or not. I actually had a chance to review the 11:30 judiciary meeting where she makes that claim afterwards. And of course, we only get 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of discussion, but I'm assuming that there was more discussion after that in which she made the request, because I did not see her make that request with the 2 hours and 15 minutes that was allotted to us with the broadcast. So that being said, we did get a chance to hear Dick Durbin say no to a subpoena. So we don't really know what was actually said, but she made the request that the Jeffrey Epstein flight log be released. No one, well, actually, they weren't released. Tim Burchett, who is a representative in the state of Tennessee, also makes a request on the House floor the other day. And that's pretty interesting to me. Obviously, you know, when I look at who's reporting it, and first of all, I'll tell you, it's the Washington Times. So if you know anything about the Washington Times, you know that the Washington Times is actually somewhat leaning right when you look at the information that they put out. They are reporting that he's made this request on the House floor. And of course, they're also talking about the fact that Marsha Blackburn made the same request in the Senate Judiciary meeting. And it looks like what you need to know is that come next year, the first part of the year, the New York court is intending to release some 177 names of people who they refer to as Epstein associates. That's probably important that we know who the associates are. And of course, we don't make these assertions lightly. So if there are people there, we need to know what capacity that their affiliations were. I think that's important for us to know. That being said, I mean, I think it's interesting that the Republicans are out in front on this issue. But I do want to caution everybody, just because Republicans are out front on this issue, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are blameless in this particular situation. They may be getting out in front of this issue because there may be other things that may be of concern to them. So it's best to be out front with these particular issues as opposed to being behind on them. So it is interesting that Democrats aren't saying much about this. Interesting that Republicans are saying much about this. I'm going to be following this story as it materializes early part of next year. We'll see exactly whose name appear. And I don't know what you think, but I have a tendency to think that there are some prominent Republican names on this list, as well as prominent Democrat names on this list. I mean, we already know that Bill Clinton was listed. We know that Bill Gates was listed. We know that Donald Trump is discussed about it. We know that RFK Jr. is discussed with it. And when I say discussed, they are people who have taken flights, what they refer to as the Lolita Express. They have taken flights and are have relationships with Jeffrey Epstein in whatever the capacity is. So that's interesting of note. We will kind of see how that particular story kind of shakes out. And I'll ask you, what do you think? What do you think is going to be on the other side of this? I have a sneaky suspicion that we're going to learn more about what was happening. And I got to remind everybody, remember, this story actually goes back some 20 years. Remember, there was a young prosecutor down in Florida that brought this case. Turns out to be a guy by the name of Alex Acosta. And Alex Acosta ends up shaping a deal to, and part of the deal was that the names were to remain anonymous. We weren't supposed to learn who were on these flights, and we weren't supposed to learn the impact they had on these young ladies in particular who were going to these islands. So, and remember, Acosta is a Republican. He gets appointed to the Trump administration's as the labor secretary and kind of collapsed under some pressure because of the Justice Department has said he had mishandled the Jeffrey Epstein case. So that was interesting. But remember that this kind of falls in the Republican wheelhouse, that it's happening on their watch. It's those individuals who are making the deal. So it makes me kind of wonder what's in this that everybody is, you might say, running scared because we know the backdrop is about some nefarious things that have taken place. Who's listed as associates and what is the degree to their association with Jeffrey Epstein. All these things are important for us to know and find out. We shall see come January, I guess they say, next year, these 177 names that will pop out. We'll learn more about what's going on with this case. So stay tuned. That's the number 5 story, folks. I do ask you in the comment section, what do you think about this particular story? Does it have legs? What are we going to learn on the other side of that? We will soon find out. So that's the number 5 story. In the number 4 spot, we have to talk about this aid to Ukraine and to Israel that is tied up to the migration issue or the issue on the border. Now, I told you during one of our previous episodes, or maybe not the last one, or the one before that, that it was imperative that this aid gets more so to Ukraine than it gets to Israel. Why do I say that? I say the aid to Ukraine is important. It's time sensitive because I don't think it will be long before the Ukrainians will have to enter into some peace accords or some negotiations with the Russians. They just don't have the manpower that the Russians have in this particular situation. And the longer it takes for us to get them assistance, the more it becomes, well, I'm going to say demoralizing for them. And the more that they will begin to lose faith in the fight, quite frankly. So, we've been giving aid for the last 2 years. And of course, if you hear Nikki Haley and a few other of the neocons and people on the left talking, if they don't get the assistance, I mean, it's just a matter of time before things go tits up over in Ukraine, and Ukraine is probably losing another portion of land. This also doesn't set up well for NATO. It doesn't set up for Taiwan. It doesn't set up well for Israel, only because, remember, there's a nexus or an axis of people surrounding the United States that are adversarial to the United States' interest, and those being Iran, China, being Russia, uh, those are in North Korea. So those are four. But I think that there are also some other partners too, of which I'm not, I will mention that at a later date when we have more information to kind of go on and kind of talk about. But right now, those are the four, and they're formidable foes. So I think if we don't do well in Ukraine, it only makes Russia stronger. It only makes China stronger. It only makes Iran stronger in the Middle East region, and presents a number of problems for us in the future. So that's my issue on Ukraine. With regard to aid to Israel, just a normal package. I mean, Israel has a right to self-determination. I'm not quite certain that the death of 20,000 people is the way we go about doing it. However, that's the way that it's going to happen. So we won't know what's on the other side of that until we get to the other side. And I will tell you right now, on the other side, what I see doesn't bode well for anybody in the region. And because I think it only leads to greater conflict, because Israel wants all of that land. Palestinian people want that land back. They have Arab nations around them that are willing to probably go to, Arab nations really aren't too fond of the Palestinian people for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway, there's some tension there, but that area of the world will become more tenuous as well. Now, what does it mean for the border? Remember, I mean, we're at the end of the year. We know that this aid package isn't going to happen. Remember, the Biden administration did tell the Republicans in the House that, hey, whatever it is you're looking for, let's make a deal. Let's get something done, because we definitely want to get this aid to Ukraine, and we want to get it done before the end of the year. That's not going to happen. So the deal was out there, but Republicans in the House went home. There's not much of, you might say, cohesiveness in the Senate in order to get a deal on the table. So it looks like all of this is going to bottle itself up and make itself known or be available for all of us in 2024 early. And remember, since this deal doesn't get done, there are political ramifications here, because remember, there are 2 CRs out there that were passed in November, right? It got us to the first part of the year, the 19th of January, the first one, and I think it's the second week of February, the second one. So think about this. If the aid is attached to the 19th of January, I can tell you right now that CR doesn't go far. Okay, so that CR probably gets us on the other side of summer, maybe August or September. There's a second CR in February. That one probably won't have too much of an issue getting passed. It'll be interesting to see how Republicans package it. But what I see, that one probably gets us maybe into the end of the year. Since they split the CR up, that puts some more pressure on the 2024 election cycle. All right. So now I want you to think about it this way, and I'm really trying to wind this story up. This is the number 4 story, but think about this. We don't get a CR done, or we get a CR done in January that gets us to September or maybe October. If it's October, that's just more tenuous. But let's say September, August or September. Then we're fighting about that. Republicans will be able to look at the status of Ukraine and say that this was the fault of the Biden administration, and they will be able to point to how we left Afghanistan and say that this administration doesn't know what they're doing, but pleading the case for Donald Trump. Now, I will tell you, I don't care if it's Afghanistan or if it's Ukraine right now. The problem that we have is that we don't have a coherent foreign policy across the board in any area. That's the bottom line. So, and I think that's where Republicans will probably lay their hat. But they also, I believe, need to come with some ideas as to how do we look at foreign policy going forward. I don't think that we have the luxury to be protectionist. So there's that to consider. But they probably will go down that particular route. I think that things are better if they're more global. But, you know, somebody may refer to me as a globalist. I'm not that. I'm just looking at the landscape and telling you that, hey, there's something that needs to be done. So we'll see how this all turns out with regard to the aid package. But we know it was important that they get the deal done at the end of the year. That's not going to happen, right? So we know that this is kicking the can down the road. We'll see it come up during the month of January and early part of February. So, folks, stay tuned. What do you think about this story? What will be the impact of this story? Aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, the migration deal that you see down on the border. What do you think the impact of that will be on the 2024 election cycle? It will be interesting to hear your comments. Like and subscribe if you like. Like and subscribe. Okay, folks, that's the number 4 story. In the number 3 spot, folks, we have to talk about Rudolph Giuliani. Now, last week, I'm not tooting my own horn, okay? But I told everybody that okay, it was good that Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman were able to get the case in their favor, a defamation case in their favor. The jury said that Rudolph Giuliani needed to pay them $150 million in damages and liability based on the defamation to their personhood, right? So that being the case, I also informed you that there was no way in hell that was going to happen. Right. Since that's not going to happen, I said that there will probably be a bankruptcy case that ends up happening. And that bankruptcy case had to be coming relatively quick because they would want to get paid out as soon as possible. And lo and behold, this past Thursday, the bankruptcy is filed. In that bankruptcy filing, we did learn that Rudy has somewhere between like $10 million in assets. So he definitely doesn't have $150 million. We also learned that he owes some back taxes. We also learned that, there's a first meeting of creditors that will be set, and there will be a plan put in place. It's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's a reorganization. Most Chapter 11 bankruptcies are debtor in possession. So the debtor does need to file some reports once a month, send them to the court to make sure that they are on schedule. The government, whatever is owed in taxes, will be paid first. Then the secured creditors, whoever they are, they will be in line second. I believe that Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss will be listed as unsecured creditors. They will be in that third spot. And so when the money does shake out, the government gets their piece first. The secured creditors get their second. The unsecured creditors get whatever is left over. Now, when the plan is released, it will be interesting to see if Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss try to get their claim upgraded to secured in order to get some money, to get something, right? Highly unlikely that is the case, but they can make the petition. Now, most people will tell you in the media and the rest of them that the debt cannot be discharged in a bankruptcy. And that much is true. The way this debt is designed. But here's the problem. Rudy Giuliani is 79 years old. So you got to ask the question, how much longer will he be around, right? And then secondly, if he's not around long, a case like this can go outside of the debtor's death, right, and continue. But the likelihood of that becomes slim and none. So again, we're back to the case that is quite conceivable. Great that they won it, right? However, highly unlikely that they're ever going to receive a dime from this case. It's quite conceivable, but after the secured creditors are paid off, this case gets dismissed because there's just no money left, right? So we'll see exactly how that all turns out. And remember, an 11 is different than a 7, different than a 13. Chapter 7 is a liquidation. Everybody, the creditors really aren't getting anything. They got some secured asset. Maybe they get them back, whatever the case may be. In a Chapter 13, a person can confirm the debt or they can discharge the debt, right? In certain cases. In a Chapter 11, it's much of the same, right? You can reaffirm the debt or you can discharge the debt. So we'll see exactly what happened. But the timeline between a 13 and a 7, or sorry, a 13 and 11 is totally different. The timeline for a 13 is over a period of 60 months. The timeline for an 11 case could be as much as 30 or 20 or 30 years. So what's the likelihood of this paying out in the case of Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman? Highly unlikely. Great that they won the case. Highly unlikely. Now, it does set up that if, I'm not an attorney, I'm a political science guy, right? But it does set up that since they were able to get a verdict in their favor with the Rudolph Giuliani portion of this, it's quite conceivable that a case against Donald Trump will be filed sometime before the end of the year. If not, I'm going to be scratching my head and wondering why. But hey, I'm just a political science guy. What the hell do I know, right? But anyway, so this is the number 3 story, something to watch going forward. We'll know. There should be a plan in place. We'll know that there's a first meeting of creditors that will take place probably within the next 60 days. I don't think they're under any time constraints when it comes to presenting a plan. So a plan may not come out until probably the mid portion of the year, or maybe even later this year. Their whole design really is to make the creditors frustrated, right? Most of these creditors are going to want to be paid, so they're going to stick around, but they're under the debtor in this case really isn't under a lot of pressure in order to put together a plan. Then, of course, there will be other motions that you will see in this particular case on behalf of certain creditors and on behalf of secured creditors and the rest. So we'll stay tuned and see how this case turns out. What do you think? Do you think Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman get a dime out of this case? I don't think so. But what do you think? Tell me about it in the comment section, and we will move on. Okay, folks, that's the number 3 story. So we heard about the Jeffrey Epstein flight logs getting released the early part of the year. We'll know more about the 177 people, right, that are associates. We talked about the aid to Ukraine and Israel, right? That's important that we know something about that. We talked about Rudy. Let's talk about the story. This is in the number 2 spot. Folks, we have to talk about what's happening in this Colorado Supreme Court case. Well, I'm not here to toot my own horn. I'm not, okay? I'm not. But I'm going to tell you, we had a broadcast back in the early part of November in which we discussed the fact that there were 12 states that had put these petitions before the court in order to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, all right? And, of course, if you can't get on the ballot, it's kind of hard for you to get electoral votes, all right? Now, you could, in certain cases, there could be write-in candidates and the rest, but highly unlikely that you get those electoral votes, right? So that being said, this case in Colorado has moved forward. So we saw on the lower court side that judge didn't want anything to do with that case. She dismissed it. Well, it was appealed by the plaintiffs, right? The appeals made it to the appellate portion in the state. A 3-panel judge agreed with the original judge, said, hey, we really don't want to have anything to do with this case. So it got appealed there. It got appealed to the Colorado Supreme Court. The Colorado Supreme Court, all Democrats on the Supreme Court, they had a split decision, right? 4-3. 4 of those justices decided that this case had merit and Donald Trump should be removed from the ballot in 2024, especially during the primaries. Remember, all ballots need to be printed by the 5th of January. So under the timeline, they issued a stay on all activity, right, until the 4th. So really, you got about the night of the 4th and the 5th to put him on the ballot. They are waiting for a response from the Trump team to whether or not this goes to the Supreme Court. And if it does go to the Supreme Court, they will be waiting some more time to figure out how exactly the Supreme Court will they decide to hear the case, right? Or will they hear the case and render a decision? Now, if it does get to the Supreme Court, there's some interesting things that we have to take a look at, because it will be to our benefit as a nation if there was a 9-0 decision. But what's the likelihood of there being a 9-0 decision? Probably not that likely, right? I'm looking at the game. Probably not that likely. I don't see a 9-0 decision. But remember the type of court that we have today. It's a conservative court. In most cases, the conservative courts are interested in the letter of the law. How was the law originally written? the originalists, remember, and they generally side with states' rights, right? So we see these two pieces come up where it should be the case that it should be a 9-0 decision that Colorado has a right to kick him off because of the states' rights issues. We'll see exactly how that turns out. I just don't see this court doing that. So we don't get a 9-0 decision. It probably looks more like a 5-4 in favor of what? Probably in favor of saying that the Colorado Supreme Court doesn't have the right to kick him off the ballot. And I'm interested into the reasoning and rationale as to why. Because remember, these are states' rights. Supreme Court justices, Alito, Thomas, Comey Barrett, even the Supreme Court Chief Justice. These guys are all ultra conservative and believe in the how it was constructed, right? So it's interesting to see how they see the 14th Amendment and especially Section 3, right? Because if they read it based on the letter of the amendment, it should be the case that it gives Colorado the right to do what they're doing. But I think that they're going to turn themselves and twist themselves into some knots on this one in order to make the case that the only people that can remove the president will be the Senate or the House of Representatives. And that's going to be very interesting. And remember, most people make the case that that when it comes to the officers described in Section 3, those officers are everybody except for the president. But you could ask yourself, and remember that the construction of the 14th Amendment came out of the Civil War. You could ask yourself the question, if you had Joe Schmuckatelli, who fought for the Confederacy, if he wanted to get elected to office, would he be able to get elected? The answer to that question would be no, right? Okay, so if he's not allowed, let's think about it. Jefferson Davis is the president of the Confederacy, right? Would he be allowed to run for president if that were the case back then? And the answer should be a resounding hell no, right? Because he disqualifies himself under the 14th Amendment in Section 3. You would think. But it's going to be interesting to see how they turn themselves into some knots, because I truly believe that they're going to make some allowance in there somewhere, and we'll see exactly how this turns out. So I don't think at the end of the day that they'll be able to keep Trump off the ballot. And I got to tell you, now I do have a problem here still. I think that the court's going to rule in Trump's favor, but I still have an issue because here we will, and that will be precedent. Okay, so the precedents from this can go a long way. And I guess I should say admonish, but I would just say that if you don't like what Republicans are doing, Democrats have some decisions to make when they get in office and whether or not they end up doing the same thing. So this thing cuts both ways. It's just a matter of how you interpret how this is going to happen. That being said, let me say this, and I'm going to wrap up the number 2 story. When I look at this, I look at Donald Trump, and I ask myself the question, out of any of the things that Donald Trump is to have allegedly done, any of those things would I have done? And I often come back in the answer and say, no, I wouldn't have done that. So a lot of the things I can tell you that are before the American people to look at based on these cases that are out here, I will tell you that we're looking at them because he decided that he was, well, in all intents and purposes, above the law. The law didn't apply to him. And I would say this precedence that the Supreme Court could set makes it a situation where the people in the majority are provided with one set of laws, and the people in the minority are provided another set of laws. Now, we could already say, if you're an African-American male, or African-American anybody, you can say that if you are a minority in this country, they look at you a little bit different than they look at the majority of this country. I can tell you that, quite frankly, In many different arenas, that's the case. So they're only justifying that. So we're left with a situation where you have laws on the books, you have amendments that have been ratified by states, right? And you look at this and you say to yourself, well, if none of these amendments matter and if these laws don't matter, what are we doing? There's a question there, because if they're not held to account, then anybody can do this. The powers that be can do this, and that's a problem. It's a major problem for the American people. It's a major problem for the republic, the democracy. I don't care which term you want to use. I mean, some people want to say republic, some people want to say democracy. I'm going to tell you that if it's a democracy, it's a republic rendition, right? So in other words, you pick elected officials. They represent your democratic interests. We could go into the details, all the fine points of what it means, but I'm not going to try to do all that today. But I will say, if they're not held accountable, and if they try to weasel their way out of this one, it only creates more problems for us in the future. So we'll see exactly how this turns out. Tell me what you think about the number 2 story for the day. Does Donald Trump stay on the ballot in Colorado? And remember, there are like 11 other cases out there. Maine is up next. Does he get kicked? And think about this one, people. If he goes to court and loses in that Jan 6 case, March, April, May of next year, and he's convicted, does that get especially blue states to remove him from the ballot? I think it does. I mean, you'll have a president who has been indicted for insurrection. So Pennsylvania becomes a player. Michigan becomes a player. Wisconsin, all of those purple states or states that are in the questionable category become battlegrounds again, making 2024. It's a crazy election cycle, but it makes those areas battlegrounds where the plaintiff in these cases that will try to seek to get him removed from the ballot. They'll probably start doing that. I think ballots need to be printed in September, if I'm not mistaken. Thinking that's the case for the general. I'll have to look up that and find out for certain. But they'll probably be moving in June, July, August in order to get that brother removed from the ballot. And if that's the case, you have a lot of people that are going to be saying it's not fair. You should have the people make the decision. But I will also say that, if it's not fair that you allow a person to run for office who has been convicted, if that's the case, right? So we'll see exactly how it turns out. Tell me what your thoughts are. That, folks, is the number 2 story. On to the number 1 story. One of my favorite topics of all year, right? Is Bidenomics working, right? So, folks, this is the number 1 story. Tell me what you think about it, right? So remember, Bidenomics, Biden and him being in office, the story behind what is Bidenomics is they want to put more money into infrastructure. So we spent some money there. They wanted to get some clean energy bills done. So we saw the Inflation Reduction Act with that built in it, along with lowering drug costs for seniors, and there were a few other pieces. So those were the Bidenomic metrics, right? And remember, Bidenomics isn't too far from original supply side economics. It's an incremental fix to some of the issues that we're having with supply side economics, right? Just saw an interception, whatever. Anyway, these codes are something else. Anyway, so back to Bidenomics. So you got this issue here where it's not that far from supply side economics, incremental fixes to things that were issues with supply side economics, right? So is it working is the question. Well, we just had more numbers released this past week, right? So we saw for the month of December, the November jobs report came in with 199 jobs created, 199,000 jobs created. That's a decent number. Remember, for economy our size, some 160 million people, Yeah, 160 million people. It should be growing somewhere between 150 and about 170,000 jobs a month, right? So 199 over that. So we're doing well. We need somewhere around 2 million jobs a year. We're above that for the year. We're doing great, right? So those numbers look pretty good, right? When it comes to GDP, third quarter GDP came in at 4.9%. That's a good number, right? Economy our size, some people said it should be growing somewhere between 1.5% and 2%. So a 4.9 number is a really good number, solid number. When it comes to core inflation, measuring CPI, CPI has come down from 9% down to 3.1%. That's good. Why is that good? Because now, remember, the American people received a pay increase, right? Now that pay increase is starting to look a lot better. It's starting to spend a little bit further, right? And the American people, we see that. We see that in the economy this season. We see that, I don't know about you, but I'm in Indiana. So I see the impact that it's having because I see more people out, people standing in long lines, people spending money. So as they spend money, that's good for, well, the overall economy, right? So inflation numbers getting better gives the American people more dollars to spend on the things where they want to spend it at a reasonable price. Remember, because the inflationary number is under the target for the increase that they receive. So they see that. So now, those are the three economic numbers that I look at. Then I also look at the Michigan survey, which gives me a snapshot as to how they feel about the economy today and what the expectations are. When we started tracking these numbers, remember, coming out of September and October, the CPI and the consumer confidence number, which is the other metrics we look at, they weren't really faring that well. We saw the economic numbers that were trending in the right direction, but we didn't see the consumer confidence number trending in the same direction. It was trending opposite, right? So, but we saw a break in that late last month where consumer confidence ticked up, right? Michigan survey ticked up, right? So again, this month, Michigan survey and consumer, well, I don't know about consumer confidence yet because that will be released this coming Tuesday. But the Michigan survey, again, ticked up. It supports the fact of what we're seeing. We're seeing more people spending money during this period. And remember, the numbers that we were expecting when it came to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, those are meager numbers that they were expecting. However, they turned out to be better than anticipated. So that's kind of fueled this fourth quarter. So I think that we're going to see a fourth quarter that is pretty good when it comes to GDP, right? Given the fact that now the consumer is on board. Since the consumer is on board, guess what? January, when we see these numbers, I think we could see GDP again, could be above 3%. It's quite conceivable that it could be above 3%. That's a good number. That bodes well for the current president's re-election campaign. He has something to run on. And as the saying goes, it's the economy, stupid. If it turns out that it's the economy that's doing well, it probably bodes well for the current president, during the month of November when we go to the polls. Now, I will say this before everybody start jumping up and down and clapping their hands and singing hallelujah from the rafters about the economy. It's all relative. Okay. It's relative because remember, I look at manufacturing as a gauge, right? And when you look at the number of manufacturing jobs, we are still below the 2007, 2008 threshold, which was, give me a good read here, let's say about 14 million jobs in the manufacturing sector. So we went through the Obama years where the bottom was like 11.4 million jobs. By the time Obama leaves office, it's about 12, let me see, reading here, about 12.4, 12.3. Yeah, let's just say 12.4. So a million more jobs in that particular space. Remember, under the 14 million, but 12 million. So got a gap of 2 million. We're at about And well, where are we at? Now we're about at almost 313 million. So we're still under that 14 million threshold, right? So comparatively speaking, where were we in, let's say, January, February, second quarter 2020? Yes, we're doing well. However, we're still under that 14 million threshold. We need to be pushing to that number, and we need all hands on deck. So you see people in Congress that have negative things to say about clean energy, right? Well, you need clean energy, right? You're going to need that. You're going to need the way the current economy is designed. You're going to need those combustion engines too, right? You're going to need every facet of this economy pulling in the right direction. And guess what? If you can get to 14 million, I'm going to tell you, you really need to be getting yourself back to, well, at the peak of this in 1979, there were over let's just call it 20 million jobs in the manufacturing sector. And if you're going to get that, people, now we're cooking with gas, right? We get there, we're cooking with gas. But right now, we're not there. Our first checkpoint should get to 14 million. We're 2 million off of that goal. So, and the longer we stay in this trench, the worse off we're going to be. Okay. Just so you know. So it's our goal to try to get better, but we got to get over that hump. We're not there yet, but we're closing in on it. All right, folks. Look, these are the top 5 stories. What do you think about the number 1 story? Is Bidenomics working? Hell, like I always say, don't know yet. Not enough information. We got some information trending in the right direction, right? But all in all, it hasn't blown up anything yet. So far, so good. So, folks, you tell me, is it working for you? Is Bidenomics working for the overall economy? You tell me what your thoughts are. This is very important, folks. Hey, we're coming toward the end of the show. Like and subscribe. Got a lot that we put on your plate for the day. A lot of good information for you to be looking forward to into the future. Remember, all of these things are important. They all feed into the 2024 election cycle, which, again, I'm going to tell you is going to be a doozy. Next year, the way this sets up, it's going to be a doozy, folks. So pay close attention. Get your questions answered by making your comments known, right? So let's talk about it. Remember, all of this is from the standpoint of being reasonable about what it is that we see. All right? It's all important. None of us get there. We're not going to get there by ourselves. The left's not going to get there by themselves. Neither can the right get there by themselves. I'm in the center. If you're an independent, you're not going to get there by yourself, right? All of us collectively working together is what makes this thing work. So, and it requires all of us to be reasonable when it comes to these particular issues. So all that being said, folks, hey, that's our show for the day. I'm sitting here watching this Colts game. They're down now 26-10. They're losing this. I don't think we're going to make the playoffs, but thank goodness I'm a Raiders fan, right? Well, they're not going to the playoffs either. So there's that. So, hey, folks, hope you enjoyed the show. Like and subscribe. Tell me what your thoughts are. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy your Sunday.